Hi, my name is Alexey Archipenko. Today I'd like to show you an example of using several new libraries to create a jazz track called Avalon Vibes. You have already heard an excerpt from the track in the beginning of the video. And as usual, you can listen to the track using the link below the video and on my site. A link to the site is on this slide. For this demo, I selected very easy to use, intuitive, yet very powerful libraries. And I will try to show most of the features of these libraries with examples. As usual, the track was created originally in Sibelius, then exported into MIDI, then imported into Cubase. And you can see that in Cubase I use separate track for each instrument. Each track has a separate instance of Contact or other VST instrument, like in case of drums. There is only one MIDI channel per track. You can see that for this track I selected 4 instruments. It is vibraphone, guitar, bass and drums. I should say that vibraphone itself is a very interesting instrument. It resembles marimba and xylophone in appearance. It also has plates that are struck with mallets, resonator tubes. The plates are arranged in piano style. And the difference is that the plates are made of metal. And in case of marimba and xylophone, plates are made of wood. That is why the plates are giving long sound after they're being struck. Due to this long sound, the vibraphone has 2 mechanisms to control it. The first is a damper pedal. When the pedal is pressed, you can play long notes. When the pedal is not pressed, so there is some muted notes. And also there is a vibrato motor that is controlled here. You can control the frequency of vibrato. And this motor drives the butterfly valves inside the resonator tubes, opening and closing them. Okay, that was a little about vibraphone itself. Let's see what Orange Tree Samples has to emulate a real vibraphone. You can see that there are 3 microphones. Each microphone has controllable width. Each has an EQ. Each microphone can be routed to an individual output if you need it. Of course, you can control the volume of each microphone, and in my case, I use close mics and add a little bit of mid and far mics. I use this approach for all the instruments here, and then I send all the instruments into the common reverb. Vibraphone takes about 600 megabytes in RAM, and you can decrease it by turning off, for example, mid and far mics, maybe turning some other mics off. As usual, you can automate most of the parameters that you see here, for example, the volume of the microphones, equalizer, width, microphones. On the play tab, you can control how the vibraphone is played. The first thing is the play mode. This is the most important thing is in this instrument. You can use 2 modes. The keyboard mode, which emulates the piano, and it is most simple for keyboard players to play this instrument using this mode. And also the vibraphone mode, which is different and which allows you to control most of the possibilities of this instrument. In a real vibraphone, a pedal is dumping all the plates at the same time. And of course, when you struck a single plate, and for example, all the plates are dumped, when all the plates are damped, striking a plate leads to a muted sound. In contrast to, for example, piano, where when you struck a key, the damper of the particular string is removed. So when playing in a keyboard mode, you can think of vibraphone like removing the damper of particular plates, but without a noise. The other way you can think about it is when you finish the note or just lift up the key, the plate is damped using a mallet. So anyway, in a keyboard mode, you have this ability to control dampening of each particular plate. I'm using the keyboard mode in this track, and you can see that, for example, the first note is played from here to here, and in a real life, this could be achieved either by closing the damper pedal here or using a mallet muting technique. But also you can see that I open and close pedal of a vibraphone using continuous control 64. The only cause to do it here is just to trigger the noises of a pedal of a real vibraphone. So when the pedal is unpressed and the keys are damped, you can hear a little noise. Each time the noise is different, and sometimes it is pretty loud. You can control the amount of noise on the setup tab. It is the fixed volume, and also you can control the which continuous control is controlling the pedal. Okay, so now returning to the play modes. If you select the vibraphone mode, then you can control how you can trigger the mallet mutes. For example, in a vibraphone mode, it is not enough to just end the note to dampen it. You need either to press a pedal to unpress it, or to put one more note here with a low MIDI velocity, lower than MIDI velocity that is specified here. So for example, you can specify MIDI velocity 4. Generally, in keyboard mode, you also can do it, but it has no purpose because the notes are already muted when you finish the note. The only cause to do it is when you have a pedal pressed and you want to end the sound just using the just ending the sound of a single plate, like this. If you do not do it, then it sounds like this. Okay, then you can control velocity response, tremolo speed and depth, although real vibraphones do not have this control over the depth of vibrato, but in this case you can do it, and generally this allows you, for example, to change different vibraphones, because different vibraphones can have different depth of vibrato and so on. One more interesting option is to sync the tremolo to the notes. This means that each time when some time passes without pressing a note and then the note is pressed, the tremolo will be open. This means that you will get pretty sharp attack and an open note. But on the other hand, this can reduce the realism if tremolo speed is very low. So you need, of course, to listen to understand if it is okay. Okay, now you can change perspective, effectively inverting the stereo panning. Increase the range, adding notes that the real vibraphone cannot play. can remove the equalizer that was used to create a more expressive tone. And also you can control the envelope. Okay, now let's see how the instrument is sequenced. This instrument has several key switches. These two key switches, D and D sharp, are used to enable or disable the tremolo. And the C key switch is used to enable the muting in case of the keyboard mode. When you use vibraphone mode, this key switch can be used to open and close the pedal, like using the continuous control 64 or sustain pedal. So being in a keyboard mode, when you see that several notes end in some particular place, then it usually means that this emulates the pressing of the vibraphone pedal. So the vibraphone pedal is pressed here, 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 then here, 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 and here. And in this place, you can see that one note is stopping and the other note is not stopping. So this can be achieved only with a mallet mute. It is when the vibraphone player presses the mallet against the plate, causing it to mute. One more interesting usage of the sustain pedal in the keyboard mode is when you want to struck the same note several times, like here. So if you just remove the pedal, then there will be a release of a note sounding, or you will need to do something like this. Just not to trigger the release sound before you struck the plate again. So you can use the pedal like this, and then you will not need to overlap the samples. Overlap the notes. In this instrument, the muted notes are not sensitive to note ends, so it is safe to have any length of the note. Okay, now let's go further. You can see some mallet mutes here. Here is the pedal, pedal again, mallet mute, pedal, 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 mallet mute, then a melody consisting of several pedals. And you can see that I create long grace notes as it is really sounding on a vibraphone, because usually grace notes are not muted. By the way, triggering a muted note in a keyboard mode also triggers a pedal noise sometimes. You can hear that sometimes it is triggering. Now you can see that here I have some melody consisting of 3 notes of the same length. And to add variety and to decrease machine filling here, I make them different length. And also one of the notes is muted. In this case, when I have some rising melody, I couple notes into pairs so that it leads to the feeling that is common for many instruments, like legato, non-legato, legato, non-legato, and so on. When setting up the vibraphone, of course, that is not necessary that you use only the realistic techniques. Of course, the most important goal here is to create a realistic sound, not necessarily using only the realistic techniques. In this case, you can think about the vibraphone like a keyboard player, for example, adding some just legatos, overlapping some notes, not thinking about how they were really muted, maybe even thinking like the vibraphone is played by a keyboard player, because very often, even in concerts, the vibraphone is played using a synthesizer. So the listener's ears are usually used to some techniques that would be pretty difficult to play on a real vibraphone, for example. So here I was just overlapping the notes, creating some legato filling. And also this turn is created not very realistic. I mean, it is created less dissonant than it would sound if played realistic on vibraphone. For example, a real vibraphone will generally play like this. And I made it this way. Maybe some more overlapping. By the way, here you can simulate a pedal like this. Here is some more overlapping, and here you run in a pedal. Also, you should remember that the beauty of a vibraphone is the interaction of the unmuted sounds. So if you have some unmuted sounds, then you should often think maybe you do not need to mute them, like here. Here is a double strike. It happens when the player hits the mallet and then at the same time sets it free so that it rebounces on the same plate. Then there are some chords. You should remember that usually a player cannot hit more than 4 plates at a time. Generally, space between chords sounds better. Like this, for example. When writing chords, you should remember that a musician plays using, for example, 4 mallets, 2 mallets in each hand, and some large chords can be very difficult to play. In this case, you can, for example, play some notes not simultaneously but sequentially. Like this, for example. Also, you can add some arpeggios, like for example here. Here you can see that I play fully sustained notes using a pedal. Here I alternate between the muted and sustained samples. And I tend to make these short runs to be sustained, because they sound more interesting. You should understand that during playing these runs, usually a musician cannot mute each particular note with a mallet, and also it is almost impossible to mute each note using a pedal, because they are very fast. So there are two ways to play these short runs, fast runs. Either you play them sustained, like this, or the other way is play them just muted. It means that the pedal is pressed, depressed. When you press a pedal after striking a lot of notes and then, for example, strike one note, then there can be dynamic disbalance. Because, of course, the single plate sounds quieter than a lot of plates. In this case, I usually increase the velocity of the strike of the successive plate to decrease this dynamic gap. At the end, I open the pedal and play all the notes sustained. By the way, you can see that I could decrease the length of the note and that would sound the same way. But I increase them so that not to forget that there is something playing here. Okay, let's talk about guitar now. This is acoustic guitar, steel strings by Orange Tree Samples. And it is very close in settings to the Strawberry guitar that I was reviewing in the hardcover tutorial. You can find it on my site. So like a Strawberry electric guitar, this acoustic guitar is very detailed. It has a lot of functions. And I will start with explaining how I set it up in the track. For example, I use the pick position and fretting position in two continuous controls, second and fifth. Then I have setting for vibrato intensity and vibrato speed. It is for continuous control first and 19th. Then setting for the noise type, which switches between the single note solo noise and the strumming noise. Also the pitch band, which controls both bands and slides. Depending on the continuous control 25, it switches between bands and slides. And of course the MIDI velocity, which controls the strike. Now let's see the instrument. It has several groups and tabs. The first group is performance. The first tab is fretting. Here you can choose between the mono and poly strings mode. When using mono string, the guitar will not sound the strings that are played several times. For example, if I play this chord, then they are on different strings, and if I put this note, for example, here, it is okay yet. Here, okay. And in this case, it plays two notes on the same string, you can see. So when I switch the mono mode, then one of the notes will not play. So the guitar will filter the notes that need to be played on the same string because it is physically impossible. In a live performance, this can help you to avoid some notes, some noises that are not realistic. But when you set up in the sequencer, you do not usually need this. You can set everything the way that the guitar can understand the chords and play the notes on different strings. In this case, the play mode is not important because all the chords that I have in this track, they are played on different strings. By the way, this one does not. Okay, the next is fretting position. This is the position that the guitar tries to stick to, if it can. And if it cannot, then it plays somewhere close to this fretting position. Also, when you change fretting position, the fretting noise is triggered and there is the loudness of the fretting noise. This is convenient, although you can also trigger fretting noise with a key switch. Here you can choose legato range. This is a range of intervals in which the legato will be played. Then there are some settings for MIDI guitar, so you can use this instrument with a MIDI guitar, including the settings for multi-channel. Then you can choose pick position. This is a position of a pick or a finger. In my case, I use fingering. Then there is a style of note alterations of different articulations. This is how they choose. I use the alternating style. Amount of pick noise and type of the noise, either strummed or single pick. This is mapped to continuous control. Then you can change tuning, move some capo over the fretboard. And also there are some settings for strumming. These settings are very useful if you just have, for example, chords like this, just put over the whole measures. And in this case, and for example, like this and like this. In this case, you can switch on the mode where you do not hear the sound when the chord is played, when the notes are played. But then you can use some additional fretting key switches to trigger this chord, or maybe the next chord, and so on. So you can use some strumming palette. You can use upstroke and downstroke, for example, like this. Something like this. Okay, so The idea here is that you do not need to copy the chords several times, and you do not need to think about the position of each note. In my case, I already had all the patterns, so you can see that I emulate strumming using the manual differences in timing of the notes. For example, here is the downstroke from the lower note to the upper note. And in this case, the lower note is triggered first and then the lower note. Also, you can see that if there is an upstroke, then first the upper notes are hit and then the lower notes. So in this case, the strumming is set up manually, but of course it is more convenient to set up using the strumming keys. In this case, you can control how many strings are hit depending on the velocity, the speed of strumming depending on the velocity. Also, you can detect chords, use open strings, control high limit and chord position. Also, you can control the resonance between the strings. I set it to maximum, and this is a sympathetic resonance of the free strings that are not struck, but that are vibrating due to the vibration of the struck strings. On the mapping page, you can map different types of fingering, picking, and tapping notes to different key switches or velocity layers or to continuous controller. I map different fingerings to different key switches, you can see it. And also you can map different effects to different key switches. I mapped, for example, string, slap, Now in this mapping page you have several tabs of controllers. You can control velocity morphing. If it is enabled, then there is smoother transition between different velocity layers, but it consumes more CPU. You can control release velocity. You can choose which releases are used, either peak release, buzz release, or open release, and how often it is triggered. Also, you can map strumming keys to different key switches. You can load some strumming patterns. Here you can control how pitch wheel is used, how the slide or bend, and which note is affected. Also, important thing is that you can control the distance of the pitch wheel. You can control how far from the initial note, for example, the slide will be if you move pitch bend wheel to the maximum or to the minimum. Also, you can control vibrato amount and speed. Stereo width, I decreased this because we have several instruments playing. Also, you can have single, double, triple, and quadruple tracks. Humanization is the difference between the tracks, effectively. And also you have a lot of effects like EQ, wah, volume, compressor, distortion, flanger, chorus, some reverbs and delay. Okay, now let's see how the guitar is sequenced. You see that it starts with some solo part. You can see that I change the fretting position several times, and each time the fretting noise is triggered. You can see that I use some legato overlappings. In some cases, legato is avoided using a gap between the notes. But in general, the legato cannot work here because the legato range is major second. Here I use legato alternating with non-legato. In general, when playing a jazz piece, usually a musician does not move a hand a lot, changing the pick position. But I decided to randomize this pick position just to get some more variety in sound. You can see that there is some wave. I tried not to get very high because at higher positions close to bridge the notes are muted. Here is a slide. You can see that vibrato is gradually increasing, vibrato depth is gradually increasing while vibrato speed is already high. This is a usual technique that I use also for some woodwindy and brass instruments. When playing the same note several times, I try to make the note different length. Here you can see it. Here go the chords. You can see that some chords have vibrato in them. And also some chords have slides. Also I put muted and harmonic key switches before some short chords. I use string slapping for additional percussive filling. At the end of the strumming pattern I use effect. It is playing on the note ends. And then solo starts. For solo I use a lot of legato. Here is a slide, vibrato, here is a bend, although it sounds a little bit strange here. Slide. Here again string slaps. Slide. Here I alternate between non-legato and legato. And then the strumming pattern is repeated. By the way, you can see that the swing rhythm was created in Sibelius, and this leads to a very important consequence of the same melody having the notes of a little bit different lengths. This sounds very realistic. Okay, now let's talk about bass. It is the iconic bass Jaco. I have already reviewed this bass in the tutorial called You Go to My Head. You can find it on my site. This library sounds very good and has a lot of control, although there are not so much controls as in, for example, the guitar libraries. So I'll talk about the two new functions that I use compared to the previous tutorial. Now I used a little bit of slapping. The slapping here sounds very close to muted picking, a muted fingering, and I use it to stop the notes. Here is vibrato. In this library you trigger vibrato with a key switch. More slapping. Sliding. Mutes. Sliding. Mutes. Vibrato. Vibrato. By the way, these short notes, I increase their velocity because if not increase velocity, they are not really standing out of the bass part. And also talking about legato. In previous tutorial I was talking about the problems using legato in this library, because even if you have some gap between the notes, it has to be enough length not to play legato. For example, this gap can play legato. So now I mapped the legato switch to the continuous control 25, and I switch legato only in the places where I really need it. So like for example here. and here. Talking about the introduction, I should say that I use here an interesting technique of using different note groupings for the same phrase that is played in an interval of an octave, different instruments. For example, in the bass, I group these notes in the legato. And in guitar, I group these notes and these notes. And this leads to a more realistic sound. Okay, so you will find much more information about this bass in my tutorial called You Go to My Head on my site. Now talking about the drums, I used new drums that I have not reviewed before. It is Toontrack EZdrummer, and it is really very easy, and it has not so much controls to be confused. As usual, you have kit pieces, and you have expansions. Each expansion, like for example this one, jazz expansion, contains several kit pieces and loops, MIDI loops. So in this case you can select different kits. For each piece you can select different pieces. For each piece you also can change the volume and the pitch, and you can try different hits of different velocity here. Also there are some claps, shakers, tambourines. In a mixer you can control microphones of different kit pieces. For example, for a kick there are 3 microphones. You can control mic bleeding, equalizing, and so on. And also you can send different microphones to different outputs. Both browser and search tab allows to find some loop. It's just a different interface. So the loops are organized into expansions. Each expansion has several groups. So each group is created by some particular performer. And inside each performer there are several types of songs. For example, straight, swing, and so on. So I had swing song, so I selected this, and then you can select some particular song with some BPM that is close to your song. Then select some part, maybe some introduction or some type of loop, closed heads, cymbals, specials, fills, and so on. Then I selected some loops that I liked, put them into the DAW, like this. There are also some improvisations. Sound very good. So I created something like this. Then I glued this all together. And then I got this track. So this clip is created this way from different loops. Then I listened carefully to the whole track and edited the part, decreasing the velocity of different instruments, or sometimes removing some, for example, measures, like maybe remove this measure and replace it with this one, like this, and so on. You can see that the loops are already randomized in terms of position. For example, this position in 1, 1, 4. This 13, second, and so on. 5th, 4th. So talking about position randomization in this track, I did not use my scripts because each instrument has its own method for position randomization, except for the vibraphone, which does not use randomization at all. So guitar has randomization in the guitar tone, it is humanization. Bass has randomization here, humanize. And the drums have the loops recorded by live people, so they're already randomized and do not need some additional randomization. In this case, you can see that the vibraphone is the only instrument that is not randomized, and in general it is not needed because all the other instruments are randomized, so it will sound not in not in exact same positions as the other instruments. I used some tempo randomization here, about 1 BPM. It is very subtle. Talking about the stereo panning, I decreased the width of all the instruments except the bass, which has not very much width. It's a mono instrument. Vibraphone and guitar has reduced width inside the control, inside the instrument, inside the contact instrument. And for drums, I reduced the stereo width using the stereo combined panel of the Cubase. It is very convenient. It allowed me to pass left channel a little bit to the right and left channel a little bit, right channel a little bit to the right, and right channel a little bit to the left. So you can control the stereo width, dragging this up and down, and you can control the panning, dragging it left and right. You can see that the vibraphone is panned to the left, guitar to the right, bass to the center, and drums also to the center. I have a little bit of the natural recorded reverberation reverb in each instrument, and then I send it to common reverb. It is 2C Ether, Jazzy Launch with these settings. And also I use for filter Pro L limiter that a little bit controls the dynamics. So it cuts sound a little bit. This is all for today. Stay tuned for more videos.